In the movement to roll back choice in this country, there is one number you will hear a lot in the coming months, 20 weeks. Over the past 3 years, bans on abortions at or before 20 weeks have been enacted in over a dozen states, most recently in Texas. With names like the Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, these bills are based on a theory that a fetus can feel pain at 20 weeks. And while they claim to be rooted in science, in actuality, they are not. Writing in Salon, Katie McDonough calls the fundamental justification for these laws a really big, really popular lie. In fact, the research behind these theories has been discredited by the Journal of the American Medical Association, the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the British Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and researchers at both Harvard Medical School and Harvard Law, all of whom claim that the brain's connections required to feel pain are not formed until at least 24 weeks, and often weeks after that. Joining us now is the assistant editor at Salon, Katie McDonough, consulting medical director at Physicians for Reproductive Health, Dr. Ann Davis, and president of NARAL Pro-Choice America, Elise Hogue.
These are conditions that are going to occur. They can be very severe, and women they're deeply affected. They feel very stressed by finding someone to take care of them, by going through surgery. They have concerns about that, as anyone would who's having an operation. And then to say to them, now I'm going to make you worry about something that isn't real, so that just adds something else onto the pile. It's not how doctors should be talking to patients.
Elise, we know that this isn't really, of course, about fetal pain. It isn't really even about I would say the protection of life. It's about a concerted effort to roll back reproductive rights and make it harder and harder and harder for women to exercise control over their own bodies.
Absolutely.
And what the most disturbing part of the 20-week ban is that this is something that was introduced on the floor of the House of Representatives in Congress. It's not just state level.
Passed.
Yes, and passed. So from your vantage, how do we increase not only literacy around this, but how does one make sure that this movement doesn't gain further steam? I mean, there is concern now that Roe v. Wade will either be rolled back or eroded enough that it really eradicates a woman's right to choose.
Because they'll go from 20 to 12 to 6 until women in this country don't have access to the constitutional rights established by Roe. And I think it's really important to expose this is not the only place they lie. I mean, these folks have about as much credibility on fetal pain as Exxon does on climate change, right? But we're also...
Hello everyone, welcome back to GGN. This is part 3 for this news report for today, for Friday, August 16th, 2013. My website is ggnonline.net, and on YouTube my channels are ddarko2012 and ddarko2013. We'll see if they allow this video to go up there. We'll see, right? Russian pole vault champion under fire for gay propaganda comments. So she defended Russia's controversial gay propaganda law. So this is after some athletes branded her homophobic. She has rejected the accusation she is anti-gay. As far as her comments go, it says maybe we are different than European people and people from our different lands. It says we have our law which everyone has to respect. When we go to different countries, we try to follow their rules. We're not trying to set our rules over there. We are just trying to be respectful. So I guess this is one of the Sweden's competitors. I guess she had like rainbow-colored nails to support LGBT stuff. She said heterosexual relations are historically considered normal and standard in Russia, and that if we allow gays to promote and do all this stuff in the streets, it would cause problems. She added that no harm in gay people. She saw no harm in gay people per se, and particularly in gay athletes competing in Russia. That it's their life, their choices, their feelings, but we're just against the publicity in our country, and I support that. But some people drew fire from the comments. Nick Simmons, who early dedicated his gold medal at the Moscow World Championships to his LGBT friends and accused the Russian of homophobia. It blows my mind that a young, well-educated woman could be so behind with the times. Guess what? A large portion of your citizenship are normal, standard homosexuals. Says here, I would be worried if my children or the next generation of athletes were looking to this Russian athlete and thinking that these comments are acceptable. Quite simply, I don't think they are. There's a British Olympic athlete that said that they're sending the message that discrimination is okay, and It quite clearly is not in this day and age. Disabled gay veteran booed by anti-LGBT protesters in San Antonio. So he was repeatedly booed by these anti-LGBT protesters as he spoke in favor of the changes to San Antonio's anti-discrimination policies that would have protections for sexual orientation. That a crowd led by several pastors rallied in front of the city hall, where over 200 people had signed up to speak for and against the proposed changes. Two public figures come out and one loses job, so the WWE wrestler Darren Young gets friendly reception. Russian TV personality made his declaration on air. It says, "I'm gay and I'm just the same person as you are, my dear audiences." President Putin and Prime Minister Medvedev, it says here, and also the politicians. He was promptly fired via text message, but somebody should do it, he said later. "I decided it was time to be open for me. That's it." WWE said it's proud of Darren Young for being open about his homosexuality. College hookup culture does not lead students to have more sex than they did before, but it is more casual. Students who attended college between 2002 and 2010 had virtually the same amount of sex as those attended between 1988 and 1996. Contemporary students were less likely to have a regular sex partner and more likely to hook up with a friend, casual date of pickup. So this is what we've talked about before about killing relationships. It's part of the higher divorce rate, and that again, killing families and killing any form of resistance to the control mechanisms. But a new study from the University of Portland has good news. They're having the same amount of sex, if not less, than students who went to college in the late 80s and early 90s. It's just the type of partner they're hooking up with has changed. They said that sexual behavior, again, behavior modification, management, this is being done by the social engineers for a reason. They said the contemporary college students are coping with a new set of norms in which marriage occurs later. This means the idea of waiting until marriage to begin sexual behavior is less tenable narrative. It says here that the culture of casual sex grows out of binge drinking, leads to sexually transmitted disease, unwanted pregnancies, and low self-esteem. It removes the romance, love, and deep caring from relationships between men and women. After more than 40 years of mounting guilt, aging Chinese apologized for cultural revolution, evil. Back then, everyone was swept up, and you couldn't escape it even if you wanted to. Any kindness or beauty in me was thoroughly, irrevocably formatted. They blame youth and ignorance. They said, although being swept up in the environment of the Cultural Revolution was one reason, I as an individual, bear responsibility for my actions. He used to call it evil actions. I think they were just duped. Like a lot of times, people want to actually form real democracy and stuff like that in communities, and instead they get tricked with words like socialism, communism. It's just a very authoritative system, just like Western democracies and capitalism. China to stop using organs from executed prisoners and transplants. The widely criticized practice will be phased out from November as voluntary donor scheme is rolled out nationwide. China is the only country that still systematically uses organs extracted from executed prisoners and transplants. And they say here, which has drawn widespread international criticism, but they don't have any criticism towards forced abortions, dragging women out of their homes. Another thing that we covered recently from August 4th, China is ending its one-child policy. The study says China to overtake the United States as world's #1 consumer. It says even with the ongoing slowdown of China's economic growth, the world's #2 economy is expected to overtake the U.S. to become the world's largest consumer market in the next 5 years. It says here, lies, damn lies in Chinese economic data. China may be exaggerating the size of its economy to the tune of $1 trillion by releasing willfully fraudulent inflation and GDP data, according to a study that's out this week. To say here that their numbers may be significantly overstated as far as their GDP, this says here through significant and systematic irregularities, the estimates overstate China's true GDP by 8 to 12%. Then we have California economist says real U.S. debt $70 trillion, not $16 trillion. The government claims the federal government has been lowballing the public for years on how much debt it actually has, according to a San Diego University of California professor. It owes it partly to actions taken by the Federal Reserve. UK wages declined among worst in Europe. Wages in the UK have seen one of the largest falls in the European Union during the economic downturn. And we have UK households to be £1,600 worse off in a year. So, I've covered this before. Europe's other crisis, recession, is bringing Europe's brief fertility rally to a shuddering halt. So, it goes on, it says the economy, as if it wasn't a big enough burden, that there's been an improvement in the fertility rates. Basically, the last decade seems to have come to an abrupt end. So far, 11 of the countries of the 15 that reported this saw falls in their fertility rates in 2011. And there's the numbers right there. It says big declines also occurred in the Nordic countries that do not have fast rising unemployment or big cuts in state spending. A baby bust, I covered this as well. Economic crisis causes fall in birth rates. So as unemployment rates have risen, birth rates have fallen to lower than expected levels in the European countries over the last decades, suggest scientists in Germany. This is from July 12th of this year. But then you see disinformation like this. Good news, ladies, infertility rates are actually falling. It says medical treatment partly to thank, says study. So good news for women who are planning to have a baby later in life. And this, of course, is, again, this is being done by design. You know, they promote feminism. You know, it's a good way to be empowered to go work for the corporate world, for the corporate man, and become another cog in the wheel. It also depresses wages for their male counterparts. And also, what? It increases the tax base, and it helps to destroy the family. So it's a win-win for the engineers. We're talking about this, the future of in vitro fertilization. It's talking about Brave New World type stuff. Designer babies and ultimate soldiers. Should parents really be able to pick their best embryos? This is where they want to push people to. So fertility treatment, and fewer women are trying to get pregnant later. But it goes on here and it says that those who are having difficulty getting pregnant and not using these aids or carrying a pregnancy to term rose almost 5%. They're talking about the infertility rate. Rose almost 5% from 10.8% to 15% in 2002. Sounds familiar, right? We live longer but sicker as chronic disease rises. People around the world are living longer but with higher levels of sickness because you have to go to the man, right, to pay. 33% of Americans raised middle class moved downwards as adults. The report does not mention people who were raised in middle class households and consciously, voluntarily moved downward. Wink, wink. The idea that children will grow up to be better off than their parents is a central component of American dream that sustains American optimism. Walking Off the American Dream finds that a middle-class upbringing doesn't guarantee the same status over the course of a lifetime. So here we go. This is from August 15th. Average cost to raise a kid, $241,000. You think this is by design? We just talked about that, about control. You make it so that it's so expensive because people rely on the monetary system. You know, put off marriage so you can pursue a career and get that big house and that boat. So you could become a slave. That's the religion, money. From daycare to monthly grocery bills, the cost of raising a child is climbing at a rate that many families cannot keep up with. At the same time, wages aren't keeping up. The country's median annual household income has fallen by more than $4,000 since 2000. The jobs lost have been replaced with lower wage jobs. Let's not forget about automation or robo-sourcing. From August 8th, Scotland's population climbs to record level, but the number of people living in Scotland has reached a new high. They say that although there were more births and deaths, the rise was mainly due to people moving into Scotland, i.e. immigrants. I covered this before. These baby boomers, along with the low fertility rates since the 60s, are the main reasons why Scotland's population is likely to age in the future. This is what their government has to say, just like all the other ones. The Scottish government welcomes the contribution these new Scots can make to our economy and society. The Uzbekistan population surges in St. Louis in the United States, a surge over the last 7 years. It says here it's adding the city to a select list of U.S. areas serving as a home to immigrants from the Central Asian ethnic group. Makes you wonder how this happens, right? Good question. Why did Somalis locate in Minnesota? You know, cold climate, right? It used to be, what, Norwegians and Finns and Swedes. You see? Refugees. See? That's what this Western proxy wars does. It just creates divisions in the tribes so there's no opposition to giving up their sovereignty, and then of course they export them over to other places where they have a different culture. So it wasn't supposed to be temporary, it was supposed to be permanent. So Somali immigrants commit 2 hate crime mob attacks in Minneapolis against white joggers. British extremists use soldiers' murder issue as an excuse to attack Muslims. French Muslims fear a surge in attacks by far-right militants, nationalist movements. The EDL in this whole PSYOP has been made to basically equate immigration with Islamophobia. Anti-immigration as a racist. British PM's black advisor slams Britons for racism. MSNBC says Boston bombers weren't radical jihadists, they were right-wing white supremacists. RNC head throws Romney under the bus, says immigration policies were racist and horrific. Benjamin Wallace says we're just a bit more racist than we like to think. And U.S. multiculturalism, or death of culture, isn't working fast enough. 40% of U.S. whites lack non-white friends.